All right. Good morning, everyone out there in the wide world of the internet, World Wide Web. Yeah, that. Good morning. Welcome to our weekly interview series, concert series. This week and today, I should say, we have the wonderful opportunity to have a tremendous musician and bassist and composer and advocate for musicians' rights and the work industry. This is a good friend of mine for many, many years now, Nate Omdal. Nate, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Kareem.
Of course, of course. For those of you that are new to this interview series, and we've done quite a few, but if you're new to what we're doing here, the interview is going to last for about 45 minutes or so. And then we're about an hour, but the last 15 minutes will be opened up to questions. So if you have questions for Nate or I, just go ahead and put your question in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to it if we can. So yeah, don't be shy. So Nate, for those many musicians or people in the music industry here in the Northwest know about you and your reputation, not only as a musician and a composer and an advocate for working with the union and musicians' rights, but for those that are not aware of your work and all the great stuff that you do, can you talk a little bit about how you got started in being involved in music?
Sure. Well, I'm a bassist, I suppose you could say. That's the first thing I should mention. We met at Cornish almost 20 years ago now, and
yeah.
And that really was how I suppose I should start my story.
Actually, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like you to go back to like how you began with music, because it's interesting not only to me, but a lot of other people want to know how you got from point A to point B, because they might have students that are starting in music. So sure. How did you begin? Did your parents listen to music around the house, or how did it go down?
My family's, I would say, casually musical, but very passionate about the music when they're there. My grandfather was a percussionist and played timpani and played piano, and that left a really, great impression on my mom, who is a lovely singer and has been in choirs and done that her whole life. And my dad is actually a pastor, so there was an opportunity there. So there was kind of hymn music and worship music in my house. I mean, it wasn't the exciting kind of worship music, but it was music nonetheless. So there was a really fertile environment. And I don't know if you know, but I draw a lot, and so there was never any sort of discouragement about pursuing art of any kind. And I joined marching band in 6th grade. I will admit that there was as much about the fact that I'd heard that if you stayed on for marching band all through high school, you could avoid gym.
Hold up. What were you playing in marching band? What instrument?
I played trombone.
Trombone. Okay.
Started on trombone, as I hear many upright bassists actually. So, but yeah, I was the right corner for all through high school. I grew up in Segal, Washington, so that's not a big city. So the music program there is run by one really, really passionate, hardworking individual who's retiring soon, Vern Foskett.
Yeah.
Shout out to him. And so that was kind of a interesting experience, just playing. I guess it was fun because I had to play it all, because we had to do it all. I marched, I did wind ensemble, the kind of the concert band competition stuff, and I got to do jazz band, and that obviously was the one that hooked. And by the time I hit my senior year, I think I was a little tired of playing some of the same parts and was looking for a different challenge. And the director said, well, here's a bass, there you go. And it just was like, oh, this is probably
acoustic or electric.
There's no electric to start with, but I can remember thumping along with Headhunters and Light as a Feather, and all the things you start with, going like, I can do this. This is just sort of happening in a way that wasn't happening on the other instruments. And so I kept playing it. And real interesting thing about when we were in high school was that was right when music that had horn sections kind of popular. Ska was around. There was that swing thing that happened for a couple of years, and I was real impressionable in those years. I can tell you what, because I thought some of those bands were pretty cool. And looking back on it, they weren't the biggest acts in the world. I wouldn't have known it, but it was still pretty accessible. And I got to talk to some of those players, and they just encouraged me and gave me a positive example of what a professional could be. And I was like, well, maybe I want to go, and maybe I should think about playing an instrument that I'm good at.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I mean, growing up in Sequim, I mean, every town, for I guess better or worse, has some sort of music scene depending on where it is. And Sequim's, for those that don't know the logistics of Washington, it's out on the Olympic Peninsula, and it's certainly not like a hub of nightlife in the same way that a place like Seattle is, or New York or something of that matter, something along those lines. So were there any places where you could go and hear live music around the area that were of note, that like you would go on a regular basis, maybe have jam sessions or watch other musicians play?
No. The thing that was interesting about my experience was we just sort of made it happen for ourselves. As I mentioned, there were some bands that were out there that were making music similar to what we could make. So we kind of did that.
Yeah.
My stupid story is that, being in the middle of nowhere, no one told us not to do anything dumb. So what we decided to do was pool our resources, and we all bought these polyester zoot suits.
Good.
That's what everybody was wearing, right?
Love it.
Yeah. So we ran around the peninsula for a couple of years in these stupid costumes, playing hits of the 40s. So it wasn't that like we got to go anywhere and see anybody play, but we got to play ourselves, and we got to put shows on ourselves and plan sets and rehearse the music ourselves and figure out how to not run 30 minutes short and how to get paid at the end of the night. And, I remember when I auditioned at Cornish, my understanding of the bass was pretty small, but my understanding of the industry compensated, you could say. My own arrangements. So
here's a question for you. So prior to going to Cornish, and you had been playing quite a bit on the trombone, and then also on the bass at that time, sounds like quite a bit. Did you have any private instruction, any musicians out that way besides your band instructor?
I took instructor was a trombone player, so I took a few summers of trombone lessons from him. He also played bass, actually, which is why he suggested this would be a switch. So he kind of showed me where the notes were, but I really didn't have any formal instruction on bass until I got to Cornish with Chuck.
Okay, cool.
There was no bad habits to start from. It was
good.
If you go back and ask some of the folks that were around, they would say, "Yeah, Nate understands a lot about music. I don't know about his bass playing."
Well, that's 20 years ago, so that doesn't apply anymore. So, well, how did you come to know about Cornish College of the Arts and make a decision to go there?
I actually got accepted to go to Cornish as a design student my junior year, and I just kept playing music, and it just kept hanging around. And I don't remember what exactly made me think I could do it. But I applied for the music department, and they gave me $50 more in financial aid than the art department did.
Yeah. That's like maybe one meal at the Deluxe back in the day, perhaps.
Thus, my fortunes turned, and I became a music major instead of design major. Over $50 in financial aid, which probably is not something I should admit to on camera.
Yeah. Particularly being an advocate of the musicians union too. That's I don't know. Mum's the word on that one. All right, so you're at Cornish, and so you mentioned that you got hooked up with Chuck. I know you're talking about, for those that don't know, you're talking about the great bassist and instructor Chuck Deerdorf, who I'm assuming at the time was still head of the jazz department there. Is that a safe assumption?
Would you say he was or is?
I think at the time I think it's changed. I don't know if he still is, but I know at the time, like when I was there, he was.
Yeah, he's enjoying retirement right now, I believe.
Yes.
At the time, it was him and Laura Kaminsky were at the top of the department. And looking back on it, I actually auditioned for Laura, which was probably to my benefit because I don't think Chuck would have let me in.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, when you got to Cornish, I know what year did you graduate?
04.
Oh, four. Okay, I was you're 2 years behind me. So who all was on the faculty at the time that you were there? Because I know a couple of people had left or were kind of in and out at the time.
Oh, I had Chuck for sure. Looking back on Cornish, since we're on that as a topic now, had a number of wonderful experiences with Randy Halberstadt. I mean, he's such a great teacher. Jovino was there while I was there. I was lucky enough to study with Hadley and Julian for a couple of semesters. I got a really good, I think actually 3 ensembles with Julian and 2 with Hadley, which is, looking back on it, when that happened, I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity to get to know Hadley as well as I did.
Yeah. So again, for people that don't know what you're talking about Hadley Callman, the great saxophonist, Julian Priester, the trombonist. All these guys are masters. Jovino Santos Neto. So all these brilliant minds. So you got to spend a lot of time with these guys, both in ensembles and then I'm assuming other classes and maybe some private lessons as well. Or who did you study privately with while you were there?
Mostly with Chuck. I ended up with I took a couple of private lessons, a semester with Don Clement that made a huge difference just in my understanding of what I was doing and what other people were doing. I studied privately with Ron Simon, who's their classical bassist on faculty, and he's got a lot of jazz experience too. And he really tuned me up, that's for sure. So I don't want to forget him. And also, I don't want to forget Margie. I had really great classes with her, and just really, she was such a positive and knowledgeable voice in my ear when I could, really needed to hear a couple of things that really helped a lot. And looking back on it, some of the things she told me stand out as much as anybody. Right.
Well, I think when I was there, she was doing, I can't remember if she was doing, she certainly did ear training. I remember taking classes with her and it was great. I don't know if did you have to do the Rings of Hell that she had?
The Rings of Hell.
Yes. Do you remember that? Did you have to do that?
I don't know if we did rings. I don't remember. I remember a lot of hand signs. That's what she was doing when we were there. But, as a bassist, she just had a couple of times where she just said a couple things that I was like, oh, I should probably not be doing that thing that I'm doing then. And it just made all the difference. So, I mean, but everybody, when you go there and you work with somebody, I worked a lot with Denny Goodhue. Everybody has moments like that where they're just like, oh, and you kind of, it just hits you in a way that you're like, oh, I'd never thought of it that way. Thank you so much for telling me that.
Yeah. Well, I think too, that was a kind of a very unique time. And this is just my opinion, but a unique time at that school because of all of the powerhouse musicians that they had on the faculty. And I was Dave Peck still around when you were there as well?
A little in and out. And I will admit that I probably wasn't any place that I got a chance to work with him just because my skill level was, I was on the coming up side than the haven't figured it out side of things. So I didn't really get a chance to work with him too much, but I did get a chance to work with Denny a lot. And I think he took a lot of the class load over for Dave at that time. And Denny Goodhue definitely, I would say, gave me a ton of stuff to chew on, a lot of stuff I'm still thinking about today.
Yeah. Well, I think the cool thing is a lot of these guys that were on the faculty, it's not only were they brilliant musicians and good educators, all in their own different ways, but they had played with all of these masters of music. So it's not just some guy that maybe can play well and has opinions, but it's like these guys have a history of doing the work with these other great artists. And so you could say, well, the information that they're giving me is real world stuff that's applicable because they've been there and done that. It's not just a theory to them. It's like they've got the experience playing with all these great people. And there's something to be said for that when you're studying with someone, I think, Oh yeah. I remember Hadley gave it, just sort of his general lesson, looking back on it, was maybe less about the dots and the lines on the paper, but more about like the passion that you play this music with. Right. Yeah. And seeing him be disrespected a couple of times by our apparent lack of passion really opened my eyes to what this music means for people. And I think that transformed me as much as anything. Yeah, totally. Well, who else was around? Let's go back to Squim just for a second. Were there any other musicians that grew up out that way that were in your circles that went on to be musicians or are still playing?
No, not really. My buddy Josh, he went into the Navy and did some pretty high-ranking military band stuff. There's some pictures of him in Times Square playing with some pretty cool cats. But he doesn't play anymore. And yeah, it was like I said, no one. Sometimes I wish there was an adult around, because then maybe I would have come out of it a little more trained than I was. But we had a lot of fun. You know, it was. I can't stress how unsupervised my high school music education was. I mean, aside from, I mean, we did the school stuff too, but then we went to my buddy's. I mean, it was just garage band really playing big band charts, which makes no sense. So we spent as much time wrestling on a backyard trampoline as we did playing charts. So
right on. All right, well, let's talk about let's go back to Cornish here. So who else were some of your peers at Cornish? Because I know there are quite a few that are still playing that have gone on to do great things. So who else was around at the time when you were there?
Oh man, yeah. I was lucky enough. I was there with Josh Rawlings and Adam Kessler and Michael Ovchuk and you and great composer down in California, Catherine Munoz. There was so many students that I had classes with. Yeah, like you said, it went on to do really, really cool things. Specifically, I suppose I'd like to thank or mention Josh Rawlings. He was we started at the same time. I think he always came at this with such a positive business mind. It was never like booking the gigs was a drag. Sometimes you meet some cats and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that part of it. He never felt like that part was a negative thing, and it was just a natural part of what we were doing here. So he always had a smile on his face about it. And I really want to thank him and call out his example on that, because that rubbed off on me, and it really helped me kind of not be as sour about that whole process as I probably could have been. And there's just a lot of guys that had that attitude while I was there about, let's try to learn a little bit about the other side of this so that we can advance this. I think most of the people that I was there with, and I wonder if you'd have the same experience, but a lot of the folks that I was there, and it seemed like it just looking up at your class. I mean, there was a couple of times I remember thinking that, you all playing a few years ahead of me could, take the world on. I think we all expected to at least have some kind of positive career. I don't think we expected to be millionaires, but I don't think we thought that this wasn't something we couldn't do, especially if we learned a little bit about the industry and weren't afraid to move around a little bit. So looking back on it, just, there were so many folks that, that are still playing. Cody Ron is out in New York now, and he was one of my really good friends. And just the expectation that we can play in sustained careers, and we should expect to do that. So let's take it seriously now while we're here. That I was fortunate to be around some people that were really operating like that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, I agree. I think for me coming to the school, I mean, I was already, I started playing gigs in high school and putting together bands and kind of seeing the realities of the music business, and not only for my own shows, but, working the door for other, taking the money at the door and for other groups and doing the promoting side of it and seeing that. And then I had some, probably, let's see, I graduated in 97. So maybe, high school. So maybe 4 or 5 years of doing that before graduating Cornish. And where I'm kind of going with this is I remember at Cornish, they had like 1 semester of like developing your professional career, which is supposed to like train you about like how to get gigs and how to do stuff. And thankfully, I already had a great deal of experience already doing that, right? And hiring other musicians and dealing with taxes and all that stuff. I can see my opinions about this are you got a kind of a small glimpse, but it didn't really, like, if someone didn't know what to do, or if they didn't have a lot of like really good social or people skills, it didn't really prepare them for like really getting a livelihood going as a musician. I mean, it's kind of like a Band-Aid approach. Would you agree with that, with your experience there? Or what are your thoughts about that? And the reason I ask is because you're so involved in the union, and I want to use this as a segue into talking about that.
Yeah. What I would say Well, first off, what I would say is the thing that gets me opportunities is because I can play an instrument well. It's that, first and foremost. I'm not under any other impression that that's not what's happening. However, the more you can understand about the industry that we're operating in, I think you can save yourself some consternation and do better for yourself. I would say the class you're referring to, the topic is so huge. They give out degrees in that topic. So I hats off to the folks that teach classes like that that are trying to I can attest to how hard that research is to stay current on, and it's a difficult thing. So I think that to segue, I suppose I could say that there's so much to learn that we really need to work together so that we're not on an island by ourselves trying to learn all this stuff. Not everybody, it's not possible to know everything. It's like a band, right? You can't play the drums and the piano and the bass while you're playing the saxophone. You need to have friends to help you out with that. And I think the same is true for your business, the business side of this thing, or the advocacy side. They are linked a little bit. I'm not necessarily someone that you should come to for advice on how to run a small business at all, but as somebody that works by now people know I work for the Musicians Local here in Seattle, and I definitely do have some insights, and fortunate to have picked up some knowledge from some colleagues that it's not anything that's automatic, and you have to work at it. So just like any other aspect of music.
Sure. So outside, you graduated Cornish in 2004. When did you start your association working with the union?
Took a couple of years. I actually didn't find my way into that office, we'll say probably from 2010, maybe 2011. I think like you said, you go out into the world, you work a little bit, and you realize this is a business, a serious business, and a tough business. And it doesn't take very long, and it doesn't take very much to find yourself in a position that you feel like you may have been taken advantage of a little bit. And there was one such night where there were about 30 of us, maybe more, that were all realizing that we were about to get taken advantage of in a way like that. And we said, I think I'd rather just save the babysitter fee and go home now. And in that moment, I learned the power of collective action, because we immediately got whatever we wanted. And I think you can't learn that lesson in a classroom. You kind of have to go out and do it a little bit and see it and realize that this is a pretty tough business in some aspects. And it's been around for a while, and the hustle is real. Well, so in your time now, so let's see, if you started in 2010, you've got about 12 years in with the union. Can you talk about, because I know you've had many different successes, one of which was like getting artist parking in the city of Seattle, where like for people that don't know, like let's say you have to load in a bunch of equipment to perform, let's say at the Triple Door, which is right downtown on a very busy street, 2nd and Union, right? And if you've got to do this, trying to park and load in is a nightmare, but you were able to actually change legislation with the city so that they have artist parking in front of the venues, which is huge for many musicians. So, and that's just one example of getting things done. But you've had a lot of meetings, I know, just from talking with you, with like the mayor or with the governor of the state, or whomever, to advocate for making working conditions better for musicians. So, can you maybe speak about some of the programs or things or the work that you've done in your time there the last 12 years? Sure. That has been probably what I've focused on, oddly, for a while now. I've found that, I'd just like to start by saying it's been probably as good for me in my career to be doing this work as anything I could have done. It got my name out there. It's helped me meet people. It's helped me get my name in circles that aren't just art circles. So that has always been a nice little kind of perk to just being out there. But let's see. Yeah, starting with the parking zones. Yeah, that was just outcome of a program that we're working on a little bit. It still exists, although it's sort of transitioning into something else now. At the time, it was called Fair Trade Music. It's a program that originated out of Portland, but we picked it up in Seattle and ran with it. And what that program was really about was venue transparency. You know, that's kind of what we're working for. We're working for with that. It was a program for musicians to sort of have some tools where they could start to seek a more transparent agreement for their gigs. In my opinion, a lot of the issues in our state, in the country, as a musician, stems from a term called worker misclassification. In that, when I'm not saying this is true in all cases, but there's a lot of cases when musicians do work and they get classified as a contractor or a 1099 worker instead of a W-2 worker. And the issue with that is that you need to be a W-2 worker to claim what we call social safety net programs like workers' comp or unemployment, which was really important in the last couple of years.
Right.
So, a lot of the work that I do with the union kind of is to try to mend that bridge, so to speak. So when we do have a situation where a musician could be an employee, that people around that situation realize that by misclassifying this individual, they can't claim workers' comp if they get hurt, which is a thing that happens in our industry.
Right.
They can't claim unemployment if, through no fault of their own, they lose the job.
Right.
They can't claim there's no healthcare tie-in there. Right.
Right.
So finding ways where we can solve that little often clerical error is something that we're looking really long and hard at right now, because while it may not be the difference between a Bentley for the individual on a massive national scale, that kind of stuff is transformative for a lot of people. And, you know, I think had more of our colleagues been able to access certain benefits over the last 18 months, you know, the road would have been a little easier for them. And
definitely,
that's what we're trying to figure out a way to do.
So for some musicians that are on the fence about, or would like to know, on the fence about joining the union, or would like to know more about the musicians union and how it can be helpful to them if they're going to undertake just being a self-employed musician, where can they go to find out more information about that?
Well, just go to the website 76-493.org, or local 76-493.org. I'm sorry. Or you can contact me at nate@local76-493.org. An easy Google search. You can just go Seattle Musicians Union, and we're the first hit. But we have a number of programs, including this program I'm just referenced called the IGM. That's the Independent Gigging Musicians. And that is a new thing that we've been working on since the pandemic started, to give musicians like you and me a few more tools about the workplace that we are in. We've put together 4 educational courses that we're starting to present across the country. I've had a chance to teach it a couple of times at a couple of universities in a couple other states, and that's been really fun. We've got one on, resumes and cover letters and talking about yourself for things like websites and grant applications. A class on contracts, just some basics. And then we have 2 really informative classes, one on federal taxes, and one on live streaming and copyright and that kind of stuff. And these are all things that are calling them 100 level classes, get some terms out there, but get some understanding, so musicians can go out there and work and not feel, like they're just sort of guessing at what they should be looking for.
Sure. And I can certainly speak to the caliber of the contract because I use it all the time. I mean, when I first got started, you get burned a couple times and you learn really fast. I need some sort of thing to protect my interest and the interests of the musicians that I'm employing so that we can get paid. And I use that contract all the time.
That's great to hear. I mean, the times when you need it, I think really offset the times when you don't.
Yeah.
In Washington, I think there's the example that I use all the time is, hey, you never know when you have to catch a ferry.
Yeah, true.
You're about to get stranded. You're about to get stranded if your employer for the night isn't letting you leave. So, have it in writing. Have a meeting of the minds, as we say. Have signatures when you can have them. At least have, verbal written communication back and forth that shows that people are, in the time when, over the last couple of years, emails have been, become a lot more standardized. So even that is better than nothing. And, so we just try to go through, but that's the class. We try to talk about what is the difference between having it on a piece of paper versus just having it in an email thread. It might not amount to a lot, but there is a difference between the two. So
I'm glad you mentioned this. I just did a contract. Let's see, I got it right here. It's on my desk. Just did it 2 days ago. But I printed it out. But it's from a production company in California, and we were supposed to do a show for them last year. It ended up getting canceled because of COVID, and so they're just rescheduling this year. But this is the first time I've seen this, and this is not even worthy of the interview, I guess, but just so you know, the contract came through in the email, and they're having it where you can basically just sign the contract just verbally by replying and saying, okay, I agree, which is, I guess, legally binding. It's a new one to me, and it's a legit company, but I have never seen that before. It's brand new. So I didn't know if you'd experienced that yet. It's just this side here.
I hadn't heard of that one, but I suppose that makes sense if you can validate your identity, if you can kind of do the, I'm not a robot things. And I mean, it's not my place to say what is permissible. I suppose do it and consider yourself covered.
I've got the hard copy too, don't worry. But anyways, I do. It's interesting.
That's the thing with all this. That's why we say, because you never know what new technology thing they're going to attach onto a thing. And I'll tell you what will always work is an old John Hancock at the bottom of a piece of paper. So if you can get that. Otherwise you're doing what we're doing right now and going like, well, I don't see this.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm old. I'm 43 now. No offense to people that are older than me, but I'm getting up there. I'm not in my 20s, and I will always prefer the hard copy any day. So yeah. All right. Well, moving away from the union, I mean, we could talk about that for the rest of the time here, but I want to talk about you as a composer, and I also want to talk a little bit about your association with Ron Jones. Now, for you and I both know Ron. He moved here a few years ago. Can you, for those that don't know, can you talk about Ron Jones and a little bit and his kind of history, and then your relationship with him?
Happy to. I need to give him a call. It reminds me. But he's a veteran television composer. He worked on a number of properties that I grew up watching, so it was a real honor to get to meet him and start working for him. He worked on DuckTales. He wrote the music for a lot of the music for Star Trek: The Next Generation for at least the first handful of seasons, and he wrote half the music for the first handful of seasons for Family Guy. So I watched a lot of all three of those shows, and other ones that he's worked on in the past. He did a little. He goes all the way back to doing parts and copy work on for Hoyt Kertman, who wrote on the Jetsons. So he's got experience, of the industry, and he semi-retired up to Stanwood. He's originally from the area. Him and his wife both are, and it was just kind of always looked to come back when he was ready to start winding down. And he bought some property up in Stanwood and opened up a really beautiful studio. And I was fortunate, at least until COVID, when things ended for everything, to help him find some local musicians to help make some of his music happen, and he just sort of let me loose in his library, and I got to ask him questions and really get into orchestrating and arranging in a way that I hadn't done yet, that I was really looking forward to doing. So
yeah. Okay. And so how did you even get in touch with him to begin with? How did that association come about?
Actually, again, I got to thank Josh Rawlings. Josh has been, he did some work for Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, and just kind of is a pianist of note to hire for the, kind of that work, pop session kind of thing these days. And I don't remember, somebody suggested to Ron that he get in touch with Josh, and the questions that Josh was asking about some of the, contracting and workforce side of things. He's like, boy, the only person I know that really has those answers is Nate. So I'd have to thank Josh for putting me in contact with Ron. We just hit it off, and boy, it was mind-blowing to see his library, Ron's library, and stack of charts and work that he's accumulated over the years, and just to start learning from him and watch him put a studio together and watch him conduct sessions, and to learn what he's done all kinds of television spots and commercials and that kind of thing, and just to hear the difference in composing for a live stage band versus composing for media. Really, I found that so useful. One, so that I could start to find work composing for media, but also it strengthened the band work that I was recording, because it gave me some new tools. And one of the tunes we're going to play tonight, I wouldn't call it a bop tune, but I think it's textural, and it paints a mood, and it paints a picture, and I really got a really nice perspective on the music from that side. Where it's more about like, what's the scene you're trying to create here with this, and what's the vibe, what's the beyond the notes, like what's the feeling we're trying to impart here, and that's important to remember with music too. So
sure. Well, speaking of, we just had, excuse me, we just had Jim Knapp last week as a guest, who I'm assuming you probably had work with at Cornish, studying composition and theory and stuff. So from looking at things, just like any musician, we all have different perspectives on ways of going about these things. But looking at things from working with Jim Knapp versus working with Ron, what are any differences or maybe similarities you noticed?
Some big differences come up, because I remember one of the big things with Ron that he always, one of the words he uses a lot is velocity.
Yeah.
How fast is that thing moving?
Yeah.
Right. And he says, because you need to remember that in context with the human brain that can really only perceive two things at once. It can hear the thing, and it can hear most of another thing. But beyond that, you're really stretching it. That's just humans, right? We're not really equipped to do a whole lot more than that. So Ron would always speak to, well, how fast is that thing you're writing going? Is it, because you're asking a lot of your listener what it is.
Yeah.
Is it broad? Is it low? Does it sit there? Is it chill? Is it cool? Because you can probably stack more on top of that.
Right.
Understand the difference of the two, and use the use the difference of the two to strengthen what you're writing, so that you have impact when it changes. And we talked 1% about chords with Ron, and how that resolves. Like it never came up. It was all about. We talked a lot about register. We talked a lot about spacing on the piano. Boom, 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 versus right? What that does to the music. Because Ron would say, I always thought it was I took it as quite a compliment when he would say things like, well, you know, you understand your language. I don't need to tell you about jazz chords, but think about, are you bunching them up? Are you spreading them out? What are you doing when you spread them out versus what are you doing to keep them close? And I was like, oh, well, yes, those are good things to think about. Not just what are the notes, but which ones might you leave out?
Yeah.
Or not, or which ones are you know, I remember just the big revelation, wasn't, you know, just that the relation. Oh, right, that, you know, that's why they make us go do that all that boring counterpoint stuff, right?
Yeah.
When you're voicing something in a group, you know, knowing that you've got a chord function on top means you don't have to put it someplace else.
Right.
If you're trying to not, you know, if you're working for clarity or something like that, those are all good tools. And, you know, he always took me back to the building blocks of this and just like think about that boring stuff because there's answers there too. And I was like, all right, you know. So I think that kind of was always in contrast to my jazz education where it was, you know, chord scale relationships kind of stuff. With Ron was just like, how fast is it going? How slow is it going? Is it big? Is it wide? Is it, you know, it was all those kind of descriptors. And it's fun to think about. I find it really refreshing to think about a jazz tune that I write now, to go back at it and look at it through those eyes and go like, well, is it wide?
Yeah.
Is it narrow? Does it feel hurried?
Yeah.
Is it all hurried everywhere? Because if it's all hurried everywhere, then it's probably going to sound like popcorn, which is cool. But no, I appreciate understanding this is going to sound a little chaotic when I pass it out versus we might get through this one.
Yeah. Well, I know I was fortunate to do several sessions up there with you guys up at the Stanwood estate. Let's just call it the Stanwood estate.
Good enough.
So with COVID, do you know, has Ron still been writing and working on projects? Because I know you said that he planned on retiring, but he still seemed to be pretty active and busy putting together projects and writing and doing lots of different things for many people.
I haven't spoken to him in a few, so I do need to call him. But yeah, last I heard, you know, I would imagine like everybody, he's raring to go. You know, I know he has been writing, and I know that pen has been busy. So knowing him, there would be music to be played. So it's just where we all are right now is what's going to be available for the next 18 months. You know.
Well, speaking of, you said the pen's been busy. So I'm curious, like, I do a lot of writing. Most of what I write for is typically, you know, trio. So bass, saxophone, and drum. So I don't need a lot of, you know, don't need like score paper, but I still do a lot of stuff by hand. And then maybe I'll transfer it into music notation software on the computer. For you, when you write, because you do a lot of composing, and I ask too for like Ron too, does he do stuff by hand? Do you still do stuff by hand, or do you all do music notation software at this point?
Ron is old school. He's pen and paper, pencil and paper on it, you know, and, big score paper and big rubber erasers. He's old school. What I do, I find composing to be a little bit of a challenge. It have just to be in the moment. There's a lot of distractions in my living room, and it's tough to kind of get down to it sometimes. So I don't have any reservations about where it's happening. For me, it's happening. I'm positive about it because it means it's happening, and I shouldn't. I should. It's one thing. You know, going back to Ron. For a guy that's as pen and paper as he is, he's also pretty tech savvy, and he kind of got comfortable with working both directions, so to speak. Like if it starts on paper, great. If it starts on a computer, great. It can go both ways. And one of the tools that I like about my process now is that I kind of have an eye on the other, no matter what it is. So that if I'm writing a song digitally, it's not too big of a deal for me to make it a piece of paper, and then vice versa. So I actually try to use both because I know that the song probably will pass through both worlds.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, I do the same. I'll do a quick thing. I can do it by hand pretty quickly. I've gotten to the point now 43 years, where you know, I can write by hand quickly, but also then start entering it in. I use MuseScore because it's free and open source and all that kind of stuff. I know there's also Sibelius, and there's a bunch of other ones now, and Finale. So, and I also know that you write not only for, you know, small group jazz stuff, for lots of different organizations. So for someone who's thinking about maybe spending more time doing composing and wants to like maybe have some sort of future in writing for film or TV scoring or things of that nature, in your experience, I'm kind of already think I know the answer to this, but is it helpful to use music notation software because that's the expected format that the music will be written in, or does it matter at this point?
Yeah, I would probably say being comfortable with, well, there's probably 3 that are standard right now with Dorico, Finale, and Sibelius. I would say being comfortable in one is pretty important. If you want to kind of get into commercial scoring, you're going to need to deliver parts. You're going to, I actually think it, some of the programs, personally speaking, it's a blend of a lot of different elements in tech in the computer world to get those robots to start sounding a little human. So I view one of those tools that you need to put on the MIDI coming from the notation software. There's just something like a staccato in Finale versus taking the bar and making it short in your DAW. It's just sometimes it just feels a little different for the part. And like I said, you're going to need to give it, you know, if you're playing it for a session, you're going to need to give it to a human anyway. So you might as well be able to hit on it.
Yeah. So do you think there's any benefit to Finale versus Sibelius versus the others? I mean, nah.
They all do the same thing, and a lot of them actually, you can spit a version out that's compatible with its competitor. So as long as you're competent with one of them and can deliver a professional score that doesn't have big collisions and, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm not going to name names, and whoever, if they watch this video, I don't want them to get pissed, but I absolutely hate reading handwritten charts on gigs that are sloppy and hard to read, because it means that the probability of mistakes goes up exponentially, you know. Some people write beautifully, some people it's just a mess. And I guess, you know, if you have time to rehearse, that's great. But like with these live streams, what we do every single week is, you know, we have like maybe 30 minutes to look at the music beforehand. So if there's involved intricate stuff and it's handwritten and it's hard to read, you know, that's why I think, you know, I like doing this stuff by hand and then transferring it over into something that's clean and legible and give people the best chances possible of having a successful playthrough, you know.
From the copy work that I've done, I viewed it like, it's like a Rorschach test. If I can hold the paper up to you and go, what do you think of this? And then get rid of it. And you go, yeah, we could probably get through it. I'm going to go like, all right. I think we probably will get through it. If I hold it up and you're like, let me see that again. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Right on. Well, I'm looking at the clock here. So we're at that point where if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the comments and we'll do our best to get to them here if you have any questions for Nate or myself. So I would say, and while I'm waiting for this, and sometimes I can't get these up on my phone here, so I'll do my best. If I miss your question, I apologize. But if someone was trying to learn music notation software, and I know now we've got YouTube and Google and all this stuff, but any place that you would direct someone who wanted to get more experience using music notation software and learning how, because there's a lot to do. And when they first came out, I remember my last year of Cornish, which was 2002. I think Cornish just got like a Finale class that they were teaching. And I know that program in 20 years has come a long way, as have all the other ones. But any good resources that you can think of off the top of your head where people can learn how to start doing those types of things?
Yeah, there's a couple. Actually, the first one I would mention is just our peers. They know that program inside and out. I've gotten some great tips from some, you know, a lot of the players that I would be handing a part to. They go, oh, hey, by the way, let me tell you how to fix this thing that I don't like.
Yeah.
So that for one is an unending source of knowledge. I won't name any names so they aren't inundated, but there's folks out there that know that all of these programs inside and out. There's a really good blog called, I think it's RPM Seattle. Robert Puff is a music editor, a local music editor, internationally known, but hails from Seattle, and he's got a really great blog. Just on Finale and on Sibelius, and it's
pretty cool.
It's just knock your socks off good stuff. But and then there's just the YouTube. But I would say between asking an older colleague that knows the software well and just hitting the Google and that one blog I mentioned, you're probably good.
Yeah, I know. I remember. I'm sorry.
I said just beyond that, just dive in. Don't be afraid of it. Something like Finale. One of the big benefits of it is how customizable it is, and so you really don't get the benefit of it unless you just get in there and start exploring and making charts and saving templates, because that's really where the power of it starts to come in.
Yeah, I think for me and for a lot of people that maybe, because I know some of those programs can be kind of spendy, and also now it's like with software, it's like you have a yearly subscription, right? And you have to keep renewing it. I think the reason I use MuseScore so much is, one, it's a free resource, it's open source, so people can keep developing it and making it stronger. But for the work that I'm doing, like I said, I'm only writing usually for 3 or 4 pieces, right? Which is very, very, and lead sheets. I'm doing a lot of lead sheets. So you kind of have to ask yourself, I guess, what it is that you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to compose for an orchestra or a big band, you probably want to do one of those things. But if you're just going to write small little things for maybe a church service or a little thing, you probably can get it with one of the free ones.
The student light versions are actually pretty good, because usually the difference between those are some articulations you'll never use, and some percussion samples you'll never use. A lot of those versions will work for like most band school education instrumentations, which is what we're working with anyway.
Right.
So, those can be options. But yeah, if you're trying to get into symphonic scoring or something like that, which is what I was doing with Ron, you do need to have a pretty powerful tool that can move measures around pretty fast. Yep.
All right. Well, let's see if we have any questions here. I don't see any just yet. So again, if I miss your question, I apologize. So currently, aside from weathering the pandemic and working with the union, I know you always kind of stay pretty active, both as a sideman and also with your own projects. So is there anything that we can expect to see? I know you're not one to sit idly by and do nothing. So what's going on? What are you up to these days?
Pandemic was interesting for all of us.
Yeah.
And, it was fun to get back to some projects that, for me, it was thinking about what I was doing when I got here, that got me here. And I've got some stuff that I'm working on right now, that a little larger ensemble stuff. But I watched a lot of samurai movies over the break. So I'm trying to get back to my roots there, and I've got some music that's inspired by that I'm hoping to put rehearsals are kind of starting to get the rhythm section going here, starting to get a few of the charts out. And I'm hoping that I can pair some of that with some of the visual art that I do actually. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a lot of what the music industry is going forward is, multimedia and being able to, we just spent the last 18 months zooming, and I don't think that's going anywhere. So.
Yeah, that's true. I think we've learned a lot of other things that we can use as add-ons to enhance what we're doing as musicians, which I think is good. I think it's good. It gives us a little bit more control over what we do and how we're able to present the content. All right. Well, and also as an aside, speaking of your artistry and drawing and multimedia success, this is a few years ago now. You had developed some Street Fighter 2 emojis. Whatever happened to those? What's going on with that?
Well, I still have them. I realized that it would take a grant to make a video game. So short of that funding, I still have all these things. Yeah, I'm always curious and intrigued by that possibility of what we do with other forms of entertainment, because I'm entertained by what we do. I don't know about anybody else, but I think it's interesting. And hopefully the song I sent that we're gonna play, the Mighty 13th. Hopefully, there's more room for projects like that going forward, where they can take advantage of. That song was always supposed to go along with something else. So, now that we're a little more comfortable watching concerts on computers, maybe I'm trying to find a positive way where I can be a part of that, along with what we've always done, but have something that can be fun and cool in that world too.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the music that you've written for today that we're going to be playing? And this is a shameless plug. We'll be at McMiniman's in Tacoma tonight, starting at 7 p.m., playing both original music by myself and Nate. And Nate, can you talk about the music you've written for this evening?
Sure. One of them is a tune I wrote a long time ago. It's called The Mighty 13th, and it actually would go in a Gladiator movie. Should I ever be asked to score one of those, I'll probably use that theme in there someplace. So, when we're playing that, hopefully you can see and hear elephants in the distance and, hordes of
the emperor doing this or this, right?
Exactly. That's the tune. That is literally the tune.
Right on.
And the other one is something I wrote during COVID. Just sort of a fun little kind of funky Jocko kind of tune. And I'm sure that the four of us are just going to tear it up tonight because it's just the kind of thing I can hear Brian Kirk laying into. So
yeah,
and I've never played that one with people before. So this is going to be so fun for a little while, playing everybody's tunes that they wrote and they're all world premieres because it's
I look forward to the Rorschach test. Hold up, we'll see. All right. Well, I'd like to ask this question of all of our guests. If you were speaking to someone who was considering becoming a musician and taking on the musician and wanting to do that full time, here you are in 2021 with all the experiences that you've had, and every guest is vastly different. But what's some advice or pieces of knowledge that you've learned over the years that's helped you be successful in who you are today? And what would you impart to a musician asking you, hey, what would help me get better? What would you tell them?
I would just say, just dive in. No one's a finished product in this at any aspect of it, whether it's performing or business or booking or doesn't matter what. This is all a process, and I don't know anybody that's a finished product, and you shouldn't let your lack of knowledge on a thing stop you. I mean, you shouldn't let that fear from not knowing it stop you from trying to do it, because the only way that you're going to get anywhere in the creative field is by just doing it and keeping at it. Everybody I know pieces it together, one gig at a time, one hustle at a time. It's not uncommon to have a little side job. It's no shame in that. I speak to, I guess to kind of leave this, I suppose I'd say something Adam Kessler, a good friend of both of ours, said about 8 months into the pandemic is, as musicians, we tell ourselves we are our date book, and that could not be further from the truth. And I was like, Adam, that's the smartest thing I've heard anybody say in a long time. And that's true, right? We're not. We're so much more than that. So I would just say, remember, as a musician, you're not your date book. You're who you are, and you're what you're playing, and you're how hard you're working. So do those things, and the rest will take care of itself.
Excellent advice. Well, Nate, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today, and thank you for all your words of wisdom and experience. Look forward to playing some music with you this evening. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you soon.
I can't wait, bud.
All right, and for everybody watching, thank you so much. If you've enjoyed this series, I think we're over a year now producing these every single week. So if you enjoy the content of the concerts and the interviews, all of which are free to take advantage of, feel free, and you want to support our work, feel free to make a donation online, either via Venmo or PayPal or mailing a check. And how you can do that is in the wording at the beginning of this post. But thank you so much. And let's see, what else is coming up? I can't remember what's happening next week. I do know the third week of this month, we're going to have the great saxophonist and composer Pete Chrisley working with us at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma. So stay tuned for that. The live stream for that will be free. And hope everyone has a very safe and happy and fun 4th of July. And we'll see you later. Thank you so much. Thanks, Nate.